What is going on, my Modern Leadership Book Club? Super pumped to be back home with you guys. We're going to be diving into part 6. And I said, yes, part 6 of Dare to Lead. We're actually winding it up today with a really powerful chapter. I just got back from San Antonio. That's why I say finally getting back to home. My brain is starting to a little bit work. I was given a lot of presentations, a lot of things going on. And, it takes a lot of energy to do that. But I love that I'm back, that I get to see so many incredible faces. Well, actually not faces, maybe words. And really, I want to dive into this book, which in the beginning, if you're here live with us, we're going to take maybe 15, 20 minutes to go through this last chapter. And then we're going to dive into the next book, which is going to be a powerful one about mastering self-coaching. But first, I want to take some roll call. Welcome, everybody, to Modern Leadership, where we see things differently. We help entrepreneurs become modern leaders so they can excel both in their personal life and their professional life, specifically when it comes to their business, without having to sacrifice family time or burning themselves out. So welcome to our Modern Leadership Weekly Book Club. I want to hear who is here. I know Amber's here, and Trisha's here, and Julie's here. What's going on, everybody? Everybody else, I want to definitely hear that you are here with us. And we're going to be winding down the book today. Now, I do want to actually ask you guys, for those of you guys who have been reading along with us, or you've gone through the other 5 replays, which basically is kind of like reading with us, right? Never really thought about that. We're kind of like our own audible version of it. I know a lot of you guys have gotten a lot of takeaways from this book. If you had to sum it down, into like one specific thing that was your biggest takeaway from this entire book, what would it be? So if you had to sum it all up into one takeaway, Elaine, good morning, good morning. What would be your biggest takeaway? All right. Let me see. For me, I think the different ways that she talks about, like we put up our armor, and when I have like certain feelings or certain things that are kind of like popping into my mind, trying to get me to put my armor up, I think that was the most powerful part to me. It was like what she broke down. I think there's like 16 different examples of armored leadership. I think those ones were the most important and impactful to me. Julie said personal responsibility with mindset. Yes, Julie, I love it. I love it. I love it. Okay. I do want to hear from everybody what your biggest takeaways are, but we're going to jump into the chapter so that we can just get and crush this last chapter. Now, this last chapter, it's actually its own part. It says part 4, learning to rise. And really what this chapter was about the times when you kind of like either you fall flat on your face or in preparation for falling flat on your face. Because if you're going to be a leader, if you're going to be doing things that are uncomfortable, if you're going to be doing things that you've never done before, you're going to run into mistakes, missteps, uncomfortable situations. You're not going to do it right the first time. And being able to prepare yourself in advance is critical. So that's really what she started off with in this chapter. She says, often leaders and executive coaches gather people together and try to teach resilience skills after there's been a setback or failure. She says what she has found is that actually learning to rise and rise up your skills prior to doing that is what's really critical when it comes to being able to be resilient and really be able to bounce back. And that's really what this chapter is all about. Now, I'm going to share some of my biggest takeaways from this chapter, but this one was, and I mean, I always feel like I say this one was awesome. And she really does a great job of explaining it. And she actually has this little framework that we're going to talk about in a minute, okay? She says, after a disappointment or fall, and they are more courageous and tenacious as a result of it. They do a process when somebody like falls. They follow a process that she calls learning to rise. It's 3-part system, and it's called the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution. So the reckoning, the rumble, and the revolution. And I think what's really important here is we read this, we kind of like understand it, we kind of like make it a part of our everyday life before the situation happens. So when the situation happens, we can go right into, okay, what are these 3 parts? What is the reckoning? What's the rumble? And what is the revolution? I always love to figure out problems in advance. I mean, that's a big deal. That's a big thing for me when it comes to like life coaching. And whether it's business coaching around people's health and fitness, coaching people around like their own career, like it's always about like, how can we solve a problem right now so that when it happens next time, you already have a path to go down. I mean, that's even why we talk about affirmations and all the things we're going to be talking about in our next book about self-coaching. But really, it's about solving for the problem in advance. And not only does it feel great that you know that when that problem comes up, you're going to be able to solve it, but most of the time we can actually see when problems are going to come up. Like whenever I have this conversation, I'm like, what are the 2 to 3 things that you know is going to try and get in your way? And what can we do right now to prevent that from happening? I can tell you, everybody already knows, right? Whether it's a scheduling thing or a thing about like their worth or a thing about what other people are going to say or what other people are going to think, like we can actually plan for that now. And that's what she likes, or that's what she did in this chapter, which I really, really love. Okay. So she says the learning to rise process is about getting up from our falls, overcoming our mistakes, and facing hurt in a way that brings more wisdom and wholeheartedness into our lives. There are situations where if we decide not to do this, where we can fall, but we actually don't learn from that experience. You know, I tend to like think of like some of the bigger things in my life that people come to me and actually ask me to help them with when it comes to family relationships and not burning myself out and my health and all that kind of stuff, is because I was failing and I was not learning the lesson, right? And it was like one of these things where it had to keep coming up over and over and over again. And one of the things that we can do is when things start coming up over and over and over again, instead of us making it mean something about us or that it's not possible for us, like really thinking about like, well, this is trying to teach me something and obviously I haven't learned it. So let's figure out what that lesson is. Okay. Now she starts off with a reckoning. She says, we are emotional beings. And when something hard happens to us, emotion drives. Cognition or thinking is not sitting shotgun next to the behavior in the cab of the truck. It's purely based off of emotions. Now, I know a lot of you guys have been a part of the life coach certification that I co-run with Josh, the Push Coach Certification School. And we talk a lot about our stories create feelings. And when we have feelings, it gets us to act, right? This is why, like when people say, like, I just didn't feel like doing it, there is some truth to that, because when you have those feelings, it will naturally get you to take action. But when you have those moments where you're kind of like going down that path of feeling like you made a mistake or something happens to you, you're going to get an emotion and a feeling in your body, and immediately taking action typically is not the actions that if we were actually thinking about it, we're going, what are the actions that I'd like to take after this thing happens? We don't typically do that. We react, right? And so giving us a little bit more time is so critical, and that's a part of this reckoning. She says, the reckoning is as simple as this: knowing that we're emotionally hooked and then getting curious about it. I mean, this is like, guys, this is like life coaching in a book too, isn't it? It's like, instead of making it mean something about you or something about the other person immediately reacting, realizing that you're emotionally hooked and then asking yourself, why am I feeling this way? Why do I want to take these actions? And you can get, especially if you have these life coach skills you've developed, you can get to the root of the reasons why that happened. She says, here's the hard news about the process though. Very few people make it through the reckoning for one reason. Instead of feeling our emotions and getting curious, we offload them onto others. So we push them off into others. Like, this is going to be a big part of the first part of my book. Sorry. It's called like taking ownership of your part of the equation, right? No matter what, you're always some part of the equation, whether it's big, small, little, or whatever. I always try to ask myself, like, what part of the equation am I when it comes to this? Even if I wasn't there, and what can I like do so that I can actually step up and take ownership of this piece, right? And that's what she's talking about here. So she's like, we literally take the ball of emotional energy welling up inside us and hurl it towards other people. Now, she has many different kinds of offloading strategies. I'm going to go through them really, really quickly. But these typically, like, I noticed that there's a couple of these that I do, but there's like one or two that I really do more than the others. This is just so when you notice that you're about to do this stuff, that you go and you think you realize like, oh, okay, so I am taking this emotion and throwing it and hurling it on somebody else. So this isn't time for me to just get curious about why it is that I'm doing that, all right? So the first one she calls is chandeliering. She says, we think we've packed the hurt so far down that it can't possibly resurface, yet all of a sudden, a seemingly innocuous comment sends us into a rage or sparks a crying fit. This used to happen to me a lot. Before I met Teresa, I would have moments of rage where it was like stupid things. Like I would just get my order, they would get my order wrong at McDonald's. And I would like go into like a raging fit because I was pushing everything down. But then there was this one moment that like made me be the person that I didn't want to be, right? I was like 17 or 18 and I was just, really just reacting to certain things. And it was small things, but it was like all the small things were adding up and I was kind of ignoring them. And this thing kind of finally happened, which was chandeliering. Next one is bouncing hurt. This is where you say like, whatever, who cares? Like none of this matters anyway. I don't really even give a darn, right? You kind of like push it away, like pretending like it's not there. It's another strategy. Another one, strategy number 3. I have a lot of life coaches who do this, including myself, and that's numbing the hurt. We call this buffering in the life coaching world, but it's like doing anything besides what you know you need to do. So if it's time to like, jump into your business and send a message, or it's time to call somebody in and have a conversation with them, right? We want to do something else besides that. We want to go, even if it's like cleaning the house or eating some food or doing something that is going to make us feel a little bit different. And doing that is a version of like avoidance, right? She calls it numbing the hurt. Number 4 is stockpiling the hurt. She says stockpiling starts like chandeliering by firmly packing down the pain. But instead of unleashing it on another person, we just continue to amass the hurt until our bodies decide that enough is enough. Hello, Crohn's disease. So I'm pretty sure stockpiling hurt was something that was going on for most of my life and eventually turned into Crohn's disease. But it's one of those things where finally the body decides to give in. Number 5 is the umbrage. She's like, this is where people kind of like pretend like everything's awesome. They say, oh, everything's awesome. I just never really feel angry or upset. If you're just positive, you can turn that frown upside down. These are like those people who they really feel something, but they're kind of like trying to mask it. Offloading strategy number 6, hurt and fear of high centering. She says one reason we deny our feelings is the fear of getting emotionally high centered. That is getting stuck in a way that makes it too difficult to go forward or backwards. It's like feeling like, well, if I cry at work or on the battlefield or in front of my students, like I don't want to do that, right? I don't want to have a conversation and have it lead down the path of like me having an emotional breakdown in this specific situation. And so as a result, they don't share anything with anybody. So those are some of the different offloading strategies. I'm not sure if like 1 or 2 of them like really connect with you. Elaine says number 5, the umbrage. Yeah. There's usually one that we tend to do more often than the others, but I do see myself like actually fitting into a lot of these different ones. I think number 4, when it comes to stockpiling hurt, that's been something that has been happening to me my whole life. And then of course, strategy number 1, chandeliering, definitely happened when I had no control over my anger in my early like teens, 18, 19. Okay. Now she said strategies for reckoning with emotion. She says the most effective strategy for staying with emotion instead of offloading it is something I learned from a yoga teacher, and it's box breathing basically. And that is where you breathe in for 4 seconds, you hold it for 4 seconds, you breathe out for 4 seconds, and you hold it for 4 seconds. I also do this right before I get on stage. I also do this right before I'm about to get on these calls. Like I do this because I put my body into like parasympathetic mode where it's like, all right, let's just calm down a little bit. Like it's going to be okay. And to make sure that I'm breathing like deeply so that way I can show up the way that I want to show up. She says, I define calm as creating perspective and mindfulness while managing emotional reactivity. I love that because calm doesn't mean that you don't have like some of the emotions going off. It's just that you're willing to be, she says, creating a perspective and mindfulness while managing the emotional reactivity. I love that so much. All right. Now, that is the first part, okay? So we talked about the reckoning. The reckoning is the first part of like really realizing what you're doing. And instead of like doing those things where you're offloading into other people, we go into what's called the rumble, which is what we have been learning a lot about in this book, right? She says, in the absence of data, we always make up stories. So the rumble starts with that universal truth. It is like in the absence of data, we always make up stories. So when you have a rumble, which is just a conversation that you're having, whether it's with yourself or with another human, we have to make sure that we don't make up stories in the middle of the rumble. This is something that she kind of talks a lot about right here. She also calls it her SFDs, which are her first drafts, her not so good first drafts. I'll just say that for stormy first draft. There we go. For YouTube, for my people here on YouTube. She really talks about like be willing to like just put it out there and know that it's your first draft, but also like don't make up stories or situations or things that are kind of like going on based off of or when it's time to actually rumble. I like in here she was talking about like how it's very easy for anybody to kind of like overindulge or to connect 2 dots, 2 points. In reality, they're not supposed to be connected, but because you don't have any of the information, your brain wants to like put the story together. It wants to solve the problem, right? And it only doesn't have enough information to actually solve the problem. So instead of being curious, we actually generate stories. Have you ever done that where you like, well, this person said this, so they must have meant this. And then you come to find out later, like they didn't mean anything like that whatsoever. It's just that you kind of like took it a little bit of a different way, right? And it's because we are just, that's how we are. That's how our beings are. We are the types of people who make up stories, and it's something that's hardwired into our system. Our system does not like to have open loops. It's also the reason why people get us on commercials, right? They end one commercial and then they start, or they get to the end of like a season, right? And they're like, it's a cliffhanger, and then you have to wait until the next season. Or right before a commercial, they're like, breaking news, this thing kind of happened. Then everybody's gonna, and then boom, it's like a commercial, and you're like, oh man, I got to sit through this commercial, right? It's because our brains don't like open loops. So we tend to like make up these stories, which is one of the reasons why we have life coaching too, because we do make a lot of stories up that we find out later are not true, right? All right. So she says, it's normal for us to replace missing information with something that's false that we believe to be true. And when we do that, we don't come to the rumble in a place of curiosity, right? She says, when we're having the rumble, she has these three different questions. She says, what do I need to learn and understand about this situation? These are kind of like powerful life coaching questions to kind of make sure that you're being and leading with curiosity while you're actually having this conversation, a vulnerable like moment where you're having and just telling people you're being clear, you're being honest, right? Is like, what do I need to learn and understand about the situation? This kind of takes it off of, it's like, I'm a problem, like there's something wrong with me, to like, oh, what do I need to learn from this situation? What more do I need to learn and understand about the other people in the story? It's another way of making sure that you're curious. And the third one is, what do I need to learn and understand about myself? These are all ways for us to just get curious and not fill in the gaps of those stories. She says conspiracy is not limited to the stupid, the ignorant, or the crazy. It is a reflex of the storytelling mind's compulsive need for meaningful experience. She said that's could be the biggest problem with rumbling, is we start to fill in the blanks with informations, worst case scenarios, but what if, or what happens if. You probably have heard that before, right? I know I personally have heard it coming out of my mouth too. Well, what happens if this, and how about this, and do all the what if scenarios in the world, right? Just to get us to feel a certain way. But in reality, that's just our brain trying to find those different stories to find out and to create really a lot of what that message actually means, right? She says, when we own a story and the emotion that fuels it, we get to simultaneously acknowledge that something was hard while taking control of how that hard thing is going to end. We get to change the narrative. When we deny the story and we pretend that we don't make up stories, then that story owns us. It drives our behavior. Have you heard of that before? Belief drives behavior. And it drives our cognition, and it drives even more emotions until it completely owns us. And this is what happens when we give up our power to our story and we're not curious and caring and really asking ourselves and other people those questions like, what do I have to learn from this? What do I have to learn about the other person in the other situation, right? And seeing it from a different perspective. Now that's the rumble, and it leads us to this last part, which is going to be super short, and that's the revolution. She says the revolution is when we get to revolutionize not only our business, not only the people that we're around, not only our career, but our entire lives, because we use this system. And when we use the system, we actually empower other people to use a system as well, so that we can create the type of environment that has leaders who are willing and daring to lead, right? And when we create that kind of environment, that's really where the revolution is. She said, if you ask me to boil down everything that I've learned from this research, which is the entire book, it boils down to these three things. And I want to see which one of these you guys most connect with. Number one is the level of collective courage in an organization is the absolute best predictor of that organization's ability to be successful in terms of its culture, developing other leaders, and to meet its mission. So number one is the level of collective courage in the organization is the most powerful of all. Number two is the greatest challenge in developing brave leaders is helping them acknowledge and answer their personal call to courage. And number three is when we fail the minute we let someone else decide our success for us. So instead of coming from a perspective of like, what does success look like for me? We're using everybody else's interpretation of success. So those were the three things that she boiled down. And that is the end of this book. Such a powerful book. I'm going to go back and I'm going to read some of these takeaways, and then we're going to jump into the other one. If you were here live, we're going to jump right into our next book. I'm going to log off and then log back in, but let me read some of these things, or some of these, your guys' takeaways as we go, and then we'll go from there, all right? My biggest takeaway from the book is where she talks about courage to do blank. Yes, Amber. Yes, yes, yes. I love the Learning to Rise chapter, for sure. This is the last one. Trisha says, for me, a reminder to rumble and do it effectively, right? Especially in the beginning, Trisha, you just may need to rumble, and by rumbling, you're going to notice what you do well and what you don't do well, right? Julie says, thinking and behavior are hogtied in the back, and emotions is driving like a bat out of hell. Love this. Yes, she gets very, very specific. I love how she communicates too. Stormy first draft. Yes. We also know what the other word is, but we'll leave it there. And then Elaine, yes. Messy action, for sure. Like, you cannot improve in action, right? We talk about that all the time on the podcast. Okay, guys, way to crush this book. If you are not in our business leadership book club, I will leave you the link inside of the description below. We read one business leadership book club, usually a month. This one took a little bit longer. And we're jumping into our next one, which is Mastering Your Life Through Self-Coaching. We're going to talk a lot about like how to really get yourself, very similar to what Brené described in here, how to get yourself to really show up as the leader that you want to by being able to coach yourself and in turn being able to coach other people. And I will see you guys, if you're here live, in like 5 minutes on the next one. But regardless, appreciate you guys so much. Thank you for being willing to dare to lead, to lean in, and to be the leader we need now more than ever. And Brené, thank you so much for for writing this. I don't know, maybe you are watching this. Appreciate you so much for leaving us this wisdom that is here. All right, I will see you guys very, very soon. Have an incredible weekend, and I'll see you soon.